Oh, hey there. You know how when you go to make something, it can typically take you a couple of tries to really nail it and create something that not only you like, but everybody else likes as well? Unless of course you're making YouTube videos, then literally f everyone else, because you will never please anyone while trying to please everyone. But that statement strikes true for a certain trilogy of Castlevania games on the Game Boy Advance. That's right, this is just another video about Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. The third time's the charm, they say, and when it comes to Castlevania games, they're typically right. Development of Aria of Sorrow started alongside its predecessor, Harmony of Dissonance, resulting in both games receiving a similar engine to one another, as well as similar gameplay aspects. However, the lead producer, Koji Igarashi, decided that he wanted to go a different route with Aria of Sorrow, setting it far off into the future of 2035. Writing this script at the beginning of 2022 and realizing that we are now closer to 2035 than we are to the release date of when Aria of Sorrow came out, that's... man, time sucks. During development, Ayami Kojima, the artist to do the character designs for Symphony of the Night, as well as Harmony of Dissonance, was brought back yet again to design the characters for Aria of Sorrow. But following the futuristic motif, characters were given clothes that better represented the era the game takes place in, as opposed to the more medieval look of previous Castlevania titles. When it came to the visuals of the game, it was extremely important that they maintained the quality that Harmony of Dissonance had brought to the table. However, whereas that game sacrificed the audio quality to achieve this, Igarashi was well aware of the criticism that Harmony received when it came to its audio, and thus took steps to prevent this from happening a second time. He had the development team work on the audio cycles while also delegating more space in the cartridge, as well as bring on Michiru Yamane, the composer who rose to prominence working on the soundtracks of both Castlevania Bloodlines as well as Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Unveiled at a press conference in San Francisco in 2003, it was released in May of the same year to critical acclaim from many video game publishers and reviewers, some even going as far as to say it was the greatest Castlevania game of all time. Oddly enough, it had poor sales in Japan in its first month, but this was made up for by its high sales in the US. Now, just for the record, how well a game does critically or financially has no bearing whatsoever on my opinion of it. I just like to put a little bit of the game's history there before I really get into my thoughts and feelings. Sometimes they may differ, other times they may align. I just personally find the information to be interesting, which is why I like to put it in there. That being said, let's get into what this game actually is. Aria of Sorrow, as previously mentioned, takes place in 2035, 36 years after Dracula was defeated for good. The whole 1999 backstory was loosely based off of a combination of a Nostradamus prediction as well as an actual solar eclipse that happened that same year. While the game itself may be far off in the future, far off, it has very little bearing on the game itself. It still takes place in a very medieval-inspired castle, using old-time machinery and magic, so don't worry if you were somehow put off by the time frame. The castle still maintains its old-timey feel, still lacking in modern technology, and everyone is still using swords and shields and... Okay, so there is a single gun, but it's also like the worst weapon in the game, so... You take the role of Soma Cruz, an exchange student currently living in Japan, who goes off to visit his childhood friend Mina, when, after ascending the stairs to enter her family's shrine, is suddenly whisked away to the front entrance of Castlevania. Because while Dracula himself was destroyed, Castlevania was merely sealed away in an eclipse. Waking up next to Mina, you're greeted by Arikado, a man that is definitely not Alucard before suddenly being ambushed by enemies that appear out of nowhere. Oh no. Alucard uses Soul Steel to kill them all, save one, which Soma then destroys with a knife, and then absorbs its soul. You know, as one does. From here on, Alucard insists that you explore the castle to try to find a way out, and thus begins our journey. As you explore, you'll encounter other characters such as Hammer, who takes the role of Merchant, Yoko Belnades, a descendant of Castlevania III's Sypha, a man stricken with amnesia, simply calling himself Jay, and of course Graham, our antagonist this go around. The scenes are typically short and sweet, and can even be skipped should you wish to do so. As you might have guessed, there is certainly a lot more story in Aria compared to pretty much all the previous Castlevania titles, but I wouldn't call it invasive. In fact, I'd say they did a pretty good job of making things interesting without slowing down the gameplay. The scenes are short and sweet and can even be skipped if you wish to do so. Unlike the previous two Castlevania games, Soma does not use a whip and instead uses a wide variety of weapons from knives, swords, fists, hammers, and so on. In fact, gameplay-wise, Aria of Sorrow is easily the closest we've come to its predecessor, Symphony of the Night. New weapons can be earned in a variety of ways, by either finding them lying around the castle, getting lucky drop from enemies, or buying them from Hammer's shop. Alongside your weapons are of course the various armors and accessories that can also be found and equipped as well. There's also been an improvement to how the shop system works this go around. No longer is the merchant found by solving puzzles in secluded rooms throughout the castle such as in Harmony of Dissonance, but instead can be found right at the entrance, which makes restocking on items infinitely easier this go around. Movement wise, Soma can run and jump, that's it. But it's not too far into the castle that you gain the ability to backdash, and as per the norm, you'll eventually find new souls giving them access to the classics such as the double jump and the super jump, while also introducing new movements such as floating and running at incredibly high speeds. And thus brings us to this game's bread and butter. You may have noticed that I didn't say relics this time around, I said souls. That's because the power system introduced in Aria of Sorrow is the Tactical Souls system. Soma's unique ability is called the Power of Dominance, aka the ability to absorb the souls of all of Dracula's minions. Almost every single enemy in this game has a chance of dropping their soul upon defeat, which Soma can then equip and use the abilities of. The souls come in 4 categories, being Bullet, Guardian, Enchant, and Ability. The red souls are bullet souls and take the place of your standard Castlevania sub-weapons. However, whereas in previous games there was only a handful of sub-weapons to choose from, Aria of Sorrow has a whopping 55 bullet souls that are attainable throughout the game. These specific souls are used the same way that you use any sub-weapon by holding up and pressing the attack button. Guardian souls are a bit more varied. Some are used for offense, some for defense, and others are used for movement. These souls are all tied to the R button. There are 24 in all. My only gripe here is the fact that, say you want to use the Bat Soul to fly around, or the Black Panther Soul to move around quickly, then you can't use any other Guardian Souls. Abilities such as these, I almost wish were tied to the other shoulder button, so perhaps you could equip the movement abilities on L and the true Guardian Souls on R, but I digress. A lot of these are really fun to use, but by the time you get the Black Panther Soul, you'll probably find yourself using that for the majority of the game, which is unfortunate because it then renders all the other Guardian Souls obsolete. Enchant Souls, also known as the Latent Souls, consist of stat buffs, immunities, and status effects, among other abilities such as walking on water or gaining HP when attacking enemies. So like the Guardian Souls, they can be quite varied, but lean more towards defense as opposed to offense. There are 34 in total, but there's a slight caveat to that, because you see, as I mentioned, some of these raise stats, and as opposed to having a single soul raise a single stat once, they decided to have 4 souls per stat. So for instance, there are 4 different souls that raise your int, 1 by 4, then 8, 12, and finally 16. Each one makes the previous one obsolete, and this is true for each stat in the game. Again, it's not that big of a deal, but it just means that some of these souls become truly useless, and the odds that you might find the souls that increase a stat by 8 or 16 before you ever find the soul that increases the stat by 4 is also entirely possible. Now would be a good time to mention, if you hadn't already guessed, that you can only have one of each soul equipped at a time. 1 bullet, 1 guardian, and 1 enchant. But when it comes to ability souls, these stay equipped the moment you get them, unless of course you choose to manually disable them. These are the closest things to the previous game's relics as you'll get, and because of that, there's only 6. The majority of these give Soma new moves such as the backdash, sliding, and of course the now series staple, super jump. Based off the sheer number of souls, it's easy to see that Aria of Sorrow has far more abilities than its predecessors, Circle of the Moon and Harmony of Dissonance, but it is not without its own caveats. As I already pointed out, there are some souls that exist purely to boost stats, and they themselves are made obsolete by superior versions of themselves. But alongside this, you're also at the mercy of drop rates, for better or for worse. What this means is that each playthrough of the game, you might get an entirely different combination of souls, unless of course you choose to grind each enemy as you encounter them. However, if you do want to get a specific soul, then you have to be a bit of a completionist and resort to grinding. In fact, Igarashi had actually added the ability to trade souls with a friend using a link cable because he thought that it might be too difficult to collect all the souls in the game by yourself. Really though, it didn't take me that long to get all the souls on my own on my most recent playthrough. In fact, there's even an item you can buy in Hammer's shop called the Soul Eater Ring, which drastically increases the drop rate. So yeah, while there is a bit of grinding, it's honestly not that bad. When it comes to the tactical soul system, I really do feel like they struck gold. I'll be the first to admit, I genuinely really liked Circle the Moon's DSS system, and I think Harmony of Dissonance's spell fusion was fun as well, but there's just something so well balanced by the tactical soul system. Not only is it incredibly diverse, but it also meshed so well with the story and the world being built in Aria of Sorrow. The previous two games have these fun mechanics, but they really didn't do much to talk about them. They just sort of existed, whereas in Aria of Sorrow, the entire premise of the game is built around Soma having these powers and going on this journey to figure out why he has these powers. Gameplay-wise, the tactical soul system was so well received, it was not only used in the sequel game, Dawn of Sorrow, which we'll get to eventually, someday, but it was basically used in Igarashi's own future project, Bloodstained Ritual of Night. Granted, it does go by a different name here and uses shards instead of souls, but the premise is practically identical. I made a brief mention of the art and the music when talking about the development of the game, but it deserves to be said again. Aria of Sorrow is truly beautiful. Visually speaking, it is one of the best looking Castlevania games to date, especially when you consider the platform that it was made for. Right off the bat, the castle entrance looks stunning, with the moon glistening in the background. Out of all the entrance locations shown in Castlevania games, I have to say Aria of Sorrow hands down is my favorite. From the foreground to the background, it's obvious the artists at Konami clearly put a lot of love into crafting these locations. No longer do they feel like soulless spanning hallways that are randomly thrown together. No, now each location feels like it's exactly where it belongs. As for the music, let's be real, it wasn't going to be that hard to improve upon Harmony of Dissonance in that regard. But they definitely went above and beyond here. Not only did they conquer the technical limitations which caused so many of Harmony of Dissonance's tracks to sound so low quality, but by bringing back Michiru Yamane, they really went above and beyond, giving us such amazing tracks as the castle entrance, the clock tower, and of course, my favorite Aria of Sorrow track, Julius Belmont's theme, aka Heart of Fire. I've said this before, but good music is one of the most important things a video game can have in terms of quality as far as I'm concerned. Not every track has to blow you away, but they definitely need to fit, and at the very least, be memorable, because they help you visualize the areas and get more immersed. Take for instance the Demon Guest House. Do I really like this song? Is it one that I would just put on and play in the background to listen to? No, not really, but it fits the area to a T. You know how sometimes you can just see an image and think, wow, I can hear this picture. Well, that's how I am if I see any picture of the Demon Guest House. I just suddenly hear this track in my head because it's that memorable. Now let's try that with Harmony of Dissonance. Yeah, I can't imagine many people see this and suddenly start hearing this track in their head. Not only did Harmony of Dissonance suffer from the audio compression, but a lot of the tracks all sound similar to one another, which makes it hard to differentiate which song goes to which area in the game. Whereas each and every area in Aria of Sorrow has its own song to go along with it, making it that much more memorable and further cementing it in your memory when you play it. As for the exploration, Aria of Sorrow doesn't have quite as many sequence-breaking opportunities as, say, Symphony of the Night, but it's also a lot less linear than Circle of the Moon and Harmony of Dissonance. There are areas in the game that you can easily skip altogether if you don't explore enough, and depending on how you play, you might even be able to skip entire bosses or souls as well. With a game built around collecting all these various souls though, you're encouraged to explore and find all the hidden areas throughout the game. In fact, if you wish to fight the true final boss, you actually have to explore to find the books that give you the hints necessary to know which souls to use when fighting Graham to prevent the false ending from happening. The bosses of this game feel pretty well balanced. For first-time players, they offer a decent level of challenge, but for returning fans, you'll quickly find yourself stomping many of them with the right combination of souls and weapon choices. But because of the various playstyles at your disposal, you can easily make fun challenges for yourself, limiting Soma to only using certain souls and the like. As for the general replayability, There's a hard mode unlocked when you beat the game, as well as a boss rush, and lastly of course is Julius Mode. This is actually probably the first time that a Castlevania game had an alternate character that I genuinely enjoyed playing. Thinking back to Richter Mode in Symphony of the Night, he was fun to play, but he was also a complete and utter glass cannon. He did great damage, but by the time you got to the inverted castle, a single hit from your most basic enemy could give you a game over, which turned the back half of the game into an unbalanced challenge. Maximum in Harmony of Dissonance was pretty unique, but the problem there was that you were playing more of Harmony of Dissonance than you really needed to. More on that here. But Julius Mode just feels right. The song that normally plays at the castle entrance is replaced with Julius's theme, which, okay, we have to talk about this track because holy shit, is it f***ing good or what? The song is called Heart of Fire, which comes from Death's stage theme in Castlevania 1, which is also called Heart of Fire. However, that's only half of the track. In fact, if you listen to the NES Heart of Fire and then this, you may notice that they don't really sound all that similar until you get halfway through. That's because the beginning half of Julius's theme is called Can't Wait Until the Night, from a lesser known Castlevania title called Haunted Castle, which was an arcade game released in the 80s. So they took both of these songs, mashed them together, called it Heart of Fire, and that's how we got Julius's theme. Then, years later, they took that version of the song, remade it again for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and named that version Can't Wait Until Night. The naming scheme may be a confusing mess, but the songs themselves are fantastic. Now then, back to Julius Mode. He comes equipped with a wide variety of hunter weapons right off the bat, which can be cycled through and used however you please. His default run is quite fast, and he also has the staple super jump, dive kick, and ground slide. Unique to Julius is his, I don't know what to call this, shadow dash? Using the R button will allow Julius to phase into the background and get behind the enemy without taking damage, and is honestly just pretty damn cool. The Belmont clan is supposed to get stronger with every generation, and I feel like Aria of Sorrow did a great job of showing us what peak Belmont is capable of. Like many of the alternate character routes before it, Julius has free roam of the castle right from the get-go, but how you choose to proceed is entirely up to you, because while Julius can't equip anything, he actually does have a hidden level up system. Each time you collect an orb from bosses that you defeat, it secretly increases your stats as well. So while you could rush off and fight Graham right away, doing so will result in a much weaker Julius as compared to clearing out the bosses in the game to power him up even further. All things considered though, this mode feels pretty well balanced and is actually a joy to play. The only other change is they for some reason got rid of the clock tower music and replaced it with the previous entrance theme music, which I think was a bit of an odd choice. It's nothing terrible, but it can be a bit jarring when you first enter the area. If you couldn't tell by the sheer length of this video compared to the previous Cups of Java on Circle of the Moon and Harmony of Dissonance, I really love Aria of Sorrow. It's honestly really hard to find faults with this game because I feel like Konami took everything the previous two games had and just built upon it even further. Both of its predecessors are really good games that I genuinely enjoy playing. But Aria of Sorrow is a great game that I can go back and play over and over and over again. When it comes to the Igavania style of Castlevania games, Aria of Sorrow is damn near the top, if not sitting at the top, for the definitive Igavania experience. I highly recommend playing this, and of course, with the release of Castlevania Advanced Collection on pretty much every platform, it is incredibly accessible. So please do yourselves a favor and play this game. Man, what an awesome game. Like seriously, I feel like I could just gush about this game forever. So if you agree or disagree, let me know. talk with me in the comments down below, because trust me, I could talk about Aria of Sorrow for a very long time. But that being said, my name is AJ, and this was just another video about Castlevania Aria of Sorrow.